Today, we have with us Hadie Leonie, an educator, creative, and podcast host.
People running into me and be like, oh my God, the podcast. They always say like they really love what we do and being consistent. It is inspirational to them.
With a Sint Maarten-born mother and a Belizean-born father, pursuing her passion for education, she moved to the Netherlands.
I think I struggled a lot with seeing my value as a person. When I just came up here, it was more so trying to find my worth.
She is making an impact in the classroom while continuing to embrace her creative side.
I've seen it now manifest into ways now where like students are running through on the streets in Den Haag and they're like nurses now, or like they started their own businesses and they remember certain conversations that they had with me.
Oh, we got to get into some of that.
Yes.
People, welcome to the SunSide Kingdom show.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me.
Welcome.
That was a really good description.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
How are you?
I'm good. I feel like the start of the year, usually when I start the year, I'm so in such a like a, I don't know, not a place of worry or just a place of like, I wouldn't say lost, but just trying to figure out where the year going to head.
Yeah.
And this year I started with so much like knowing what I want to do.
Oh, nice.
So it's like, I just feel like at peace in a way.
Yeah.
So in general, I'm good.
Nice.
You?
You're switching these podcast hosts.
I'm not accustomed to being a guest. It's like, you know. But
I'm asking the questions,
okay,
Hadie.
I can answer the question.
But I'm good.
Yeah?
I'm feeling good. Actually, that's also part and thanks to you guys, because you guys definitely started the year off in a bang, and I was very grateful and happy to be part of that.
Yeah.
January 10th moment, a few days before my 40th birthday.
Which is beautiful.
It definitely set the tone and the energy for me starting off the year. So I really love that.
The year of 5.
And that's actually coming out in a vlog. The vlog might be out by the time this episode is out. But anyways.
Okay. You documented the night.
Yes. I could give you a preview later.
Please. I want to see it. Yeah.
All right. So tell us a bit more from your perspective. Who are you today? And what has been some of your biggest accomplishments over the last 2-3 years?
Sometimes when I think, well, that's a good question, but sometimes when I think about it, I think have started to become the person I always dreamt of becoming.
Nice.
I don't think I have a actual way of describing like, okay, I'm this person specifically, but I always knew one of my biggest passions and purpose was to just be a person for the people and not necessarily, I guess in a way, like you want to accomplish things on a personal level, but I feel like for me, it was always about doing something for others.
Yeah.
And I always wanted to be a teacher. So I think that's part of my purpose, like teaching. And to me, people always talk. I know when we started the study, one of my teachers was like, you either want to be a teacher because you love the subject or because you want to be a teacher. So like, I like English, but it's not really why I do.
You
know? But I feel like to me, it's more so like we call it pedagogiek. So like the pedagogy of everything. So like the connection with the students, having those conversations and help them like becoming the person they're supposed to become.
Yeah.
I think like that's one of my purposes. And I've seen it now manifest into ways now where like students are running through on the streets in Den Haag and they're like nurses now.
Oh, wow.
Or like they started their own businesses and they remember certain conversations that they had with me. So I feel like on one level, that's part of who I am.
Yeah.
Just always an educator and a teacher of life. And that manifests in its way of also the podcast.
Yeah.
So to me, when we started the podcast, it was just to kind of bridge the gap between like who we were and who we wanted to be, but also like have those conversations on camera for our generation. Because there's a lot of podcasts out there, but I think the representation of seeing people who think or who come from the same background is what was missing for me personally. And just to be that inspiration, I guess, for others and also to myself, because I think when I look in the mirror, I still want to be the person that, you know, I'm proud of and that I continue to be who I want or set the level to be. So I would say that's who the person I am now. And I think in the past few years, so teaching the podcast and also joining, you said Say Less Sis earlier. I felt like I started the podcast, but I wanted to do something that was more hands-on on the ground on the island. Because if people ain't familiar with Say Less Sis, they were doing a lot. Because during the pandemic, they started like this whole online movement for the people up here.
Yeah.
Because they did like a lot of live shows basically, but like literally on live.
On Instagram Live. Okay, yeah.
Where they connected a lot of creatives and artists so the people had something to watch and do during the lockdown.
During the pandemic, yeah.
And then that manifested into like so much content and like bridging our culture and sharing it with the world. And I just wanted to also be more hands-on in that way. So that's why I joined them. So yeah, I'd say I'm a true Sint Maartener too. So that's who I am.
So then for those, for the few out there that might not have heard of Bite the Bullet podcast, could you dive into exactly what it is, why you guys started it?
Okay.
So elaborate on that a bit more. Sorry for the interruption, but please like, comment, and subscribe. It helps the channel out so much. So we can get this content out to more people that definitely need inspiration, motivation, and that mindset shift to elevate them to the best versions of themselves. Thank you. Checking in, checking out from the sunny side of the kingdom. Bless.
So Bite the Bullet is basically a podcast with me and my co-host Jojo Renee. And we kind of wanted to have a podcast where we talked about everything. So, and especially the things that we deal with as young adults, whether that's mental health, your social life, dating, just everything, pop culture, music, everything that goes on into the world, and have the conversations also with women and men that sometimes are a bit taboo, but also sometimes we just don't have.
Yeah.
Or for some reason, the two are in a heterosexual world, like they just don't align or see each other's perspective a lot of the time. So that was also one of our biggest goals. But then also, I think it's so funny when we started, I don't think we expected our niche to be Caribbean. It kind of just happened.
Yeah.
And we realized that that's what people were taking away from it the most, that they were connecting with us just based on the fact that we were from the islands. But we more so set it off just to be as individuals at this age, I guess.
Yeah.
But we touch into everything, basically. And it kind of manifested now into us starting our own business, having our own studio. And
So those are actually some of the accomplishments.
I guess it's so funny. Like Jody was taking me for this. That like I don't tap myself on the back, but it's like, how to put it? Like I know I achieve things.
Yeah.
But it's not, I don't know.
Is not your forefront focus.
Yeah. It's not, because it is a part of who I am. But to me, the biggest thing is like just how I show up in the world. And I think
and the impact that you could create for others.
Exactly. And of course, on an internal level, there's things I want to achieve and I'm proud of.
Because actually, you didn't tap in on let's say the metrics that others would normally choose. Like, okay, we started a business, we opened our own studio, etc. But you gave the examples of running into the students that are now nurses.
Yeah.
So maybe let's tap into, from your perspective then, how have you ran into anyone where the podcast has impacted them in a certain way that you could share?
For sure. I think the funny thing is, like, I know my friends personally and my brother, like, they're the people that message me firsthand to just discuss things that we're talking about. But then even on the streets of, especially the Hague, that's where I live, just people running into me and be like, oh my God, the podcast. And then the biggest thing for them is like, they always say like they really love what we're doing, but also specifically the fact that they have a voice of the people.
Yeah.
For them is just really what matters the most. And I think from people from the outside looking in, I think a lot of people are just proud that people from the islands, the small islands, Sint Maarten and Saba, just as an inspiration, being consistent in what we're doing, it is inspirational to them. But a lot of the topics sometimes is like, damn, like, yeah, Like they thought about it, but also hearing it into words, that what does it for them. I think that's in general like the biggest things I've heard over the past few years with the podcast. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that deserves a little tap on the shoulder.
I know. I need to start doing it more. But yeah.
But it's part of your personality, and you shouldn't change who you are for anything. So.
Because I think about it like, not that I'm not business minded or whatever, because my mind is always constantly going. But I guess that's just not, I don't know.
It's not at the forefront.
Yeah.
And that's fine. So how, because you mentioned purpose now a couple times, and you mentioned earlier that you feel that the season that you're in now, you're really starting to blossom into the person that you always believed you could be. So how deeply do you feel currently connected to purpose in your current career and outside ventures?
Connected in what way? Like,
so let's say how do you feel that you're living out your purpose?
So funny enough, because I journal sometimes too, and I was looking back at a lot of different, like, where I was when I started my study, where I was when I was struggling with my study, because that's something a lot of us face when we come up to this country, and just simple things and what I wanted to achieve. Because before I started the podcast, I think the first thing I started was my YouTube channel, doing makeup. And even when I started that, it wasn't necessarily because of makeup. It was because I saw a lack of representation of women that looked like me. And just at the time I lived Groningen, so it was even hard to find makeup for my skin color and etc. So I watched back a couple of videos the other day, and I realized like everything I started from back then was always to send a message and to really be an inspiration to others that I often didn't always had growing up. And so in turn,
so be the inspiration for others, which technically is the inspiration for yourself that you wish you had
as a younger adult, or just even as a teenager sometimes. And I feel like back to everything I do now, whether that's the podcast or teaching, I realize that I am doing it. You know, it's just sometimes I need to sit in it and realize that. But I feel like I'm already doing it without realizing sometimes. And it's definitely me walking in line of my purpose, and I feel connected to it. But I think sometimes, and I know some people might relate in the sense of like, you do stuff sometimes, like what I say, but you don't sit and like notice all the steps that you've taken up until this point.
Yeah, so that's unless you actually pause and take time to reflect on all what has happened, what has transpired, and how it has affected you, and how it has transformed you into, let's say, the next level.
Yeah, exactly. But it's only moments sometimes, like when I sit back and read things or just look back, even, iPhone is really do us dirty and show memories from like, they show pictures from 2018.
Why are they doing us dirty? Okay, so maybe that's a generational disconnect now. So why is the iPhone doing us dirty with that?
You don't have the widget that shows random.
But I wouldn't say doing us dirty.
But then, not doing us dirty, but then like showing me where I was back then, okay? I guess. Maybe it's not dirty.
So what well, let's tap into that. Okay. Because you say the iPhone is doing us dirty, and it shows me back in 2018. But why would you feel that way? So you weren't in the best place in 2018?
Definitely not.
Okay.
In a sense of, I definitely struggled because I was one of those, they say, long studiators. Like it took me 8 years to get my diploma. At the time, so this was before COVID. At the time, I was living in Zuid.
So you moved to Amsterdam as well?
Yeah, so I moved from Groningen to Zuid and then to Den Haag.
Yeah.
And I was in a place of like, basically what I'm speaking about now. Like I knew what I wanted to be doing, but I didn't have the resources to start. And also I was, because we come up here to study, and then sometimes you have this moment of like, is this really what I want to do? Yeah. Because I know, like I like teaching, but I know outside of that, there's always going to be other things that I want to tap into.
Yeah, other things that you're interested in.
Yeah. So it's like, do I follow one path and realizing, I guess over the years, I realized you could follow multiple paths.
True.
So I guess I was in that phase of just trying to figure it out, but then also on a personal level, like if I was in a right relationship that was draining me. So it was a lot of things at the time that was dealing with. So it's not that why I say do me dirty, realizing that like
so the iPhone was just reminding you of a period in your life that was pretty intense and difficult. So that's why you're like, hey, you're doing me dirty by reminding me of that. But when we 5 years into the future and the iPhone is reminding you of this time, this time period, you might go, oh.
Yeah, I will. I'm not going to consider it doing me dirty. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Or Snapchat memories. But yeah. But I guess in a way I shouldn't word it like that. It's not doing me dirty. It's just actually reminding me of like where I came from or what the journey was actually. So yeah.
Yeah, so you were going through the motions and feeling that this version of you, you know that there's a version of you with higher potential. You can start to see that version of you. You can start to feel that version of you, but you're not living that version of you. And that can be very, very difficult.
It is, yeah.
So what steps did you take or what did you need to change in order to start to tap into that potential version of you and then become the version of you that you are today?
Yeah.
Because if we look back, it's been almost 7 years.
Yeah.
So there's quite some life that happened.
We were so funny because I don't know if people know we was having conversations before here about the years. And as you were speaking, I was just there reflecting on where I was because we basically have the same number. But I think honestly, going back to maybe it might sound cliche, but like talking to people that I knew always saw that in me. So for me, that's my mother and definitely my brother. Those are like the two pillars in my life that always bring me back to reality of who I am. And I think at that moment, I didn't have that in me. But then having those conversations with them of realizing like, maybe there's certain like environments you need to take yourself out of to really do what you're supposed to be doing. Yeah. And my mother's a very like say how she say it, straight to the point, down to earth type of woman. So she would just have those conversations with me, and I think realizing like, okay, and sometimes we don't want to hear what they have to say. Yeah, yeah. But I've always been a person where like I hear it, I listen a lot, and I go back home and I like sit in it. Okay. And it took a lot of self-reflection, and it was hard. I'm not going to lie. It was hard of like having to pick yourself up and just basically exit out to certain things, and be real with yourself. Yeah. Because I think not I was living in delusion, but like definitely not being honest with myself that a lot of the things I was doing or choosing for myself wasn't beneficial to me. Yeah. And until I had do that is when I started noticing the changes of actively getting up every day to do the opposite of what I was doing before. And I think as I was doing that, eventually I just started to love the feeling and realizing like, okay, now I'm starting to feel like this is who I'm supposed to be and this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And I just continue channeling that energy from there on forward. So basically. If we jump back to 2018, so by when do you feel that you kind of cut some of those ties and moved on? I would say it took a while. I would say COVID, but also COVID. Like a lot of people talk about COVID was a hard time, but it was also it was a time that a lot of us needed. Yeah. Because when you're home, sitting down with yourself for hours, you realize like, okay, because you don't know where the world heading right now. So it's like, I realized like, so it took 2018 to 2020, you could basically say, because 2020 is when I really shifted. I really started, because I also started other podcasts before, but I was a Dutch podcast with this other friend. And even in that situation, it was like, I was ready to work. And I was like, okay, like I spent so many years now wasting time and energy. I was so ready to work. And I guess, unfortunately, the situation wasn't in that space because everyone not to go there, but like so then
But they weren't really ready to work at the same pace you were ready to work. So you needed to find your energetic partner.
Exactly. And I guess even in that moment, that was also a moment of realizing, like, instead of sticking in it, like, I exited immediately.
Yeah.
And that
This
was
ain't
like,
serving me, gone.
Exactly. And then that's when I realized, okay, like, I'm starting to basically, like, what's the saying? Because you could have a certain way of being and habits, but then it's like when you faced with actually having to practice what you preach in certain situations, I realized, okay, cool. Like, I was ready because I was out. Some people look at it. I remember having a conversation with one of my friends from Celeste. She was like, you could sit there and really try, but ultimately, like, sometimes people don't realize how exiting a situation is actually like the best thing you could do.
Oh, yes.
For yourself. And don't look at it as something bad, but look at it as like you actually setting the boundaries and knowing what you want.
Yeah.
And that was like
and the crazy thing about that is the more that you practice it is the more that you realize that sometimes you have to exit certain situations that is taking up a certain amount of energy, because and in some ways they might say energy is infinite, but around each person there's also a finite amount of energy.
Yeah.
And if there's things that are not serving you that are taking up energy, that means that things that can be serving you can't be in that place.
Exactly.
So you need to actually move that away in order to free up that space to then allow the things that can actually serve you to flow.
But I find it sometimes so hard, especially when some of us grow up with that mentality of like, yeah, but these are your people. And like we focus a lot on community, and sometimes you have that loyalty of like, just because it's your people, you don't want to, I guess, call it not negative energy or whatever. You try to give things like grace, whatever.
Yeah.
But then it's like being real with yourself, of realizing, but that comes sometimes with an expiration date.
Yeah, exactly. So, Reasons and seasons.
Exactly. But yeah.
Awesome. All right, so let's tap back into growing up. So you were born on Sint Maarten to a Sint Maarten mom and Belizean dad.
Yeah.
How was that like home?
Oh, it was.
So you have one sibling?
No, so my father had two sons, and they still live on Belize.
Okay.
They came to live with us a couple of years when I was younger. And then with me, I guess in the household, my mother had me, my brother, and me. I'm the youngest of four. Okay. Basically. So I'm the only girl.
The baby.
I'm the baby and the only girl out of four. But for my mother, she has two kids. Yeah. But for me, it was interesting because on the island, I only had my mother's family, but they're huge. Yeah. And they are, in its own, also a very big inspiration. But then I had my father, but Belizean also has this Caribbean culture, so it's not like it was that different, but their norms could be different in the way of like how they run a household. Okay. So I guess that was the biggest difference.
Is that anything you could tap into?
I don't mind tapping into it. I don't know if everybody's going to be happy, but I guess they're more traditional. Okay. In a sense. And my mother is a very, as I say, like, opinionated, outspoken person. And I remember a lot of the times that clashed. Yeah. Growing up. And but at the same time, I think that also shaped like me and how I wanted to show up in the world. Yeah. Of knowing that I have a voice and not letting anybody silence down. But at the same time, it was lit because I also had family in America because my father's side, they all moved away from Belize in a way. Yeah, so when we went on vacation in the summers, it would be Miami, New York, California.
Yeah. Oh, nice.
All over. So I always got to leave and be with that side of the family.
So then you got exposed to quite... Yeah. Because going on vacation is one thing, but going on vacation where family is, that they're sort of embedded into the society gives you a whole other experience.
It does. But also the switch of like seeing my father speak, because I don't know why. I guess if you grow up with a parent with an accent, I didn't see... I guess growing up, I didn't think it was an accent. I just thought that was how my father.
Yeah.
And then I see him around his brothers and sisters, and it's like this big switch to the Belizean accent. It was always so funny to me.
So then the accent like cranked up a couple notches. Yeah.
It was interesting. Yeah. But yeah, I love the culture too because it's very linked to, because they have the Mayan culture very nearby, I believe.
Yeah, yeah.
Also, Mexico is right there, so
Yeah.
that's like the influence for a lot of the cuisine as well. But then also linked to Jamaica because apparently like a lot of the slaves they had in Jamaica was also like in between the two Belize and Jamaica.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just a whole other history
Yeah.
outside of the Sint Maarten one.
But you've been to Belize as well?
Yeah, we went, I think in my lifetime I went 3 times.
Okay.
Beautiful place. But it's so beautiful and big also, but just also it is a third world country.
Yeah.
So we didn't go often. Yeah.
Oh, very interesting.
But you know it? Like you've heard of it.
Well, I definitely heard of it because I've been a hip hop head since basically my teens. I mean, as a kid growing up, you would listen to the popular songs, so you know them.
Yeah.
But when I was 13, at that point, well, just before I turned 14, I moved to Dominica because my mom's family is from Dominica. And I had a similar experience maybe a bit later in my life because her family also, many of them moved away from Dominica and living in the States. So by the time that I started traveling to the States, I started meeting a lot of my family that were in New York, in New Jersey, in Philadelphia, and then going and being with them that are integrated into society, then you get like a true, authentic New York experience.
Exactly.
What up, cuz? Nah, that's the police there.
Exactly. Oh, I love it. Yeah. But also just realizing how worlds apart, where we are, even though it's like a plane right away.
Yeah.
And that they're like how they grew up is so different, even though you family. So that was also cool to me in a way. But then my core family growing up was, the holidays on the island. So then that was also different. Yeah.
Well, they're known for being successful and in a lot of key positions and very much education and thing oriented.
Yeah, for sure. But I think also like what I always remember growing up is like feeling like this
But they also come from one of the other islands a few generations back,
basically,
right?
I guess you could say we Kitishans.
Okay.
Because my grandmother was a Kitishan and my grandfather's mother was a Kitishan. And then also linked to Margaret. So it's like friend side and St. Kitts.
So then it was like 3 generations back that moved to Sint Maarten?
But it depends which side of the family you're talking about.
Okay, well, I don't know the whole history.
Yeah, the holidays themselves are Kittian. But apparently they spell it differently. In St. Kitts, they say holiday, like holiday.
Like holiday, like with an A? Okay.
And then I guess by the time it came to St. Maarten, they changed their last name to Holiday. But then essentially it's St. Kitts. And then, of course, that was my grandfather's mother's side, but then his father was L.B. Scott.
Oh, okay. So that is then like core Sint Maarten.
Yeah, and that's the core Sint Maarten side. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's I think if you dive into everyone's history, it's the West Indies is all mixed up. All connected somehow.
Or they just never really was rooted into one island.
Yeah.
Because even like my Belizean side, we had a family tree moment where a family reunion, and my aunt realized that her mother's family came from a boat from Barbados. And then
so you got Bajan in you too?
Basically, yeah.
Wow.
So it's like all over. And then when my brother did the DNA test, they could link the 23andMe. They could link some of our relatives to like Jamaica, but back to, I think, back then with the slaves being transported. So it's like, you're never really from one island.
Yeah. So you're a Caribbean person, West Indian.
Basically, yeah.
So with that being said, how would you say that your Caribbean roots has influenced your career trajectory and even the way that you operate within your careers today? Because I think you have 2 simultaneous tracks going right now.
I think that's rooted in everything I do. I think going back to the point of, I think, yeah, my family was always successful, but I think what I wanted to say earlier is a big thing growing up in that family is like, I guess, loyalty to your culture and your island and community and making sure you give back.
Yeah.
Because my mother was also an educator, but on the side, I always saw her being in organizations that was big on whether that's helping the education on the island, the youth on the island, or just organizing events for or lectures for the people to kind of better themselves. So that's kind of, I guess, where that stemmed from for me, in the sense of like everything I do going to always be for people, which is why I think that's who I am.
Yeah.
And I think also why I am the teacher I am in a way, because for me it's also about making sure fostering, like even within the classes, that they realize that they're not, because the generation now is so individualistic, but realizing that they're part of a world and a society, and that's basically
a bigger community.
A bigger community, and I think that's that's the message I put out there. And then even back to the podcast, when we realized it became such a Caribbean thing, we really wanted it, because I was at the phase of not knowing if I wanted to stay here around when we started. Yeah. And Jody was set on staying here, but she always wanted to give back from here. Yeah. And I think even her saying that made me also realize that what we're doing is also giving back to the island, even though we're not physically there. And then we kind of just continue fostering and seeing how we could do that moving forward.
Because I definitely know you guys have listeners on the island as well.
Yeah.
And that's also something that you would want to continue to grow.
For sure.
And inspire.
But you don't I think I was telling you that, because I went in 2023 like 3 times. I think I went Carnival, summer, and Christmas. And then the people stopping you on
that was
the road.
The year that you was really homesick and ready to go.
3 times. But that's also the year, because that's the thing. I don't know if everybody have this, but when I go back, that's the moment I'm like, oh, I do want to be here. And then, because I was there so much, but also I saw a lot of my friends go back and seeing them succeed at going back, because I think sometimes we have this idea that going back would be setting ourselves back. And I saw them actually thriving even to this day. So it gave me another perspective of realizing that it might not be a bad thing to go back, you know, and I guess that's where I was in that time mentally. But back to the question of how my Caribbean roots helped shape who I am today. I think that's just who I am. I can't hide my accent, even within the classroom too. Like, I don't speak like this, but they hear it. And then trying to also...
So how do you speak in the classroom?
I have my American accent that I speak.
Well, give us a little preview.
But you're hearing the accent still? No, I basically speak like... I don't like to call it proper, but I basically speak more clear.
Yeah, you articulate more.
I articulate more, and I tap into the American side of me, and I speak like this. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
But yeah, highlighting that the Caribbean is part of English culture and language, and moving forward, though, I do kind of, in my personal life, I know I am a creative, so I really want to tap into I think I have so much ideas in my head of just creating a network of Caribbean businesses, so we call kind of thrive. So that's always where my mind is. And now that we have the studio, a big thing is that we also want to kind of look into helping with advertising. So but I would definitely always want to, that's where I am mentally, start with the people around us and our community. Yeah, and kind of create, put us on the map.
So if we tap back again into, let's say, growing up, going through your teens, going through your early 20s, where you at right now in the current stage, are there any significant mentors that you had that whether they were in your life directly or even persons that you started to follow online because you needed answers and their content was sort of providing those answers. Could you tap into some of those mentors?
Yeah, I think when people hear the word mentor, you think there's actively someone you go to for advice all the time. And there was that. So back to my mother, my brother, or I think a big thing is like my friends. Even though some people might think you wouldn't go to advice for your friends, but I had a lot of friends that they're in different fields, whether that's like cancer research or administration or accounting. Having friends that help me navigate life. But I have a lot of online people I went to. And that was the YouTube world, though. Because I'm very much into looking at, for me, it was about
representation. I'll help you with the tongue twister.
Representation. So back then you had people like Jackie Aina, but I was more the makeup world. Okay. I think, like, if I have to be honest, I think I struggled a lot with seeing my value as a person. So in that stage of my life, when I just came up here, it was more so trying to find my worth and looking for, I guess, looking at people that was doing it so that I also felt like I could do it. And that was most of the mentorship to me because I didn't have actual conversations with them. But seeing them achieve
certain things. But why you think that was? That was because you were in Groningen, that was pretty far away from everyone. So the physical interactions was a lot less.
For sure. And I think I didn't realize, like on the island you experience it too, because I said I dance. Maybe we can get into that later. But in certain,
we could get into it now.
Yeah, I dance. I'm gonna be very honest. I dance at Motions Dance, and I was having conversations with a couple women now that also danced with me back then, and we talked about how that was such a toxic environment. In the sense of like whether it was just blatant racism or colorism, or just also the dance culture in itself. Of like having to present yourself in a certain way or have a certain type of body and like always constantly like questioning if you like even simple things of, okay, maybe today I dance well enough to be in front and always trying to, I guess you never feel like you're great or good enough.
And how long did you dance?
11 years.
Wow.
I think I started at 3 and then I stopped at 14.
So then, okay. So that really got embedded in you.
That was embedded in me. And I think that manifested in a lot of my life of like constantly worrying or wondering if I was good enough. Because that was a big part of my life. So I think once I realized that I wasn't seeing the value in myself, I guess a lot of the things I was choosing to watch subconsciously was what was helping me find that. And that was the biggest mentorship to me. And
so it was sort of like a re-education then, because they educated that young kid up until what you said, 14?
Yeah.
Some very horrible education.
I mean, I love dancing, you know, I love being in a space where you have each other and stuff like that. But there was a side to it that was also, I would say, as for a lot of young women that are young teenagers, that's a time in your life where like you want to fit in. You're struggling with like puberty. So that shaped like who I was definitely at that time. And I could imagine for a lot of other people. But as for actual also people I would go to advice, like my mother. She's, I've been saying it over and over again, but like, and I know I realize it's also a privilege.
Mom, you did a good job.
She did a good job, but I realize it's also a privilege.
It's also a privilege because not everyone has those type of relationships with their mom.
No, that you could go to for anything.
Yeah.
And give solid advice that wants the best for you. But also just show up and actually give the help sometimes when you need it. And that's also in itself a privilege. But
and how was the advice, the mentorship, let's say in the early days of starting the podcast journey? Because this is technically the third podcast for you then.
This is the second. basically.
The second. Okay.
Yeah.
So Say Less Sis wasn't really a podcast.
They started as a podcast, but when I joined on, it became more of like an online thing for the community.
Okay.
And just us creating content. My mother was, she's, because going back to the thing, because she's always, that's why I say realistic, because she would always be like, okay, she always wants me to go for what I want to do. And she saw, funny enough, she saw the value in us, what we was doing.
From early
on. So like even when we went in summer 2023, she helped me get in contact with a lot of radio stations to make sure we could have promote the podcast.
Yeah.
And she's always been that type of mother to like, it comes across as like, what you call that, micromanaging. Like, okay, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. But then it helps you because it's like, you have somebody that actually helps or sees the vision, that believes in you basically. But also being realistic of like, okay, but financially, is this a good decision right now in your life? And always asking the questions that I ask myself, like, okay, like, but if you stay in Holland, like, how long do you think? Like, just asking the questions I really had to ask myself of like, okay, if I'm struggling with not knowing if I want to be here, realistically, for real, like, is this what I want to be doing? And because I had the situation where the other podcast didn't work, and at the time Jody was a new friend, she was like, okay, do you see this being a dynamic right now?
Because you guys only in recent years linked up.
Yeah, I knew her, but I was mostly friends with her older sister.
Oh, okay.
Her sister is around my age.
Okay.
And so she was around as like the little sister. But then I also just noticed like how much she was also inspiration to me. And as now, like she's also a mentor in a way of like, I love how her mind works. So at the time when we started having more conversations too, I was like, no, mommy, like this is somebody like I can tell. Because one thing with me, like my intuition is like, is there. And I can really tell. I just noticed like that was somebody who was serious about what they were doing in life. Yeah. Back to the question of my mother being my mentor, she was just asking me questions that always kept me like, I guess down to earth and realistic. But funny enough, also my brother. But my brother is a mentor in the sense of like, he hates when I say this, but to me, he's just like such an amazing human being in how he like shows up in the world. Like he's
how much older is he?
He's 3 years older.
Okay.
But we like to say like we're 3 years apart as twins.
Yeah.
Like we connected in that way. So he helped me navigate life itself. I think from a creative standpoint or like what I was doing financially or whatever, that would be my mother. But as of like the choices I was making within my life, that was always
so
my
you
brother.
Really was big bro.
Yeah, he is really to this day. But he's also like one of the biggest podcast fans too.
Oh,
so
nice.
He watches everything and we like talk about it. But even back to like our upbringing and certain things that we dealt growing up with, we could stay speaking on the phone for like hours. And just I think having those conversations, it was kind of like therapy for each other.
Yeah.
And making me realize certain habits I had where that stemmed from.
Yeah.
And also him being realistic with me as to like getting out of those situations I was speaking about.
Yeah.
So I would say those are my two active biggest mentors. And
that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Like having your mom and your
my brother. Yeah. And I would say right now, like in the podcast world, like I have mentors in the sense of like they're like who I aspire to be. There's like these two young women from London, the Receipts podcast. I think the past 5-6 years I've started watching their podcast, just everything they've been doing.
Yeah.
Rather than specifically for Black British culture, I watch what they do, and that kind of actually. I think watching that podcast is what really inspired me to want to tap into podcasting. Yeah. Because I saw so much of like how necessary it was for their space. And that's kind of what had that was the seed for the plant of like, we need that for our space. Yeah, yeah. And so moving forward, I realized a lot of the things that they do or we do sometimes is like so aligned. And I've gotten to meet one of them. And so having the conversation with her, we were having the conversation of like sometimes when you come from the diaspora, because she's Nigerian, and you don't feel like there's a place in the world that feels like home necessarily. It's like home is wherever you are.
Yeah.
That was most of what the conversation was, but also just about like feeling back to the conversation of feeling like you're worth doing whatever you want to do, though, wherever that is. I would say those two women are also big mentors for me right now.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah. I was interested when I saw the question, and I was like, "What about you, though?" But I don't know if I'm allowed to ask you that.
What?
Like a mentor for you.
Oh, a mentor for me. Wow.
But you never get asked the question.
Well, no one ever asked me the questions because I'm hosting.
Yeah, but still, because when you gave the presentation by the St. Martin's Day event, it was November 30th, and you went through the slides of everything that you were doing. I was just wondering if, like, especially my generation or the younger generation, I know the OGs, I know they know of you, but then to see all that you have done and accomplished, I also find that in itself like inspirational to see that someone from the island is doing it on this level. So then I wonder, like, who inspired you?
Who inspired me? For me, I feel that's a very loaded question.
Oh,
but let me try and go through some of it. In the very early days, actually recently I had this conversation. So I grew up, born on Sint Maarten. I just keep repeating this because I need to give it that context.
No,
born in Sint Maarten, we left and we moved here to the Netherlands. And at the time when we moved to the Netherlands, it was my mom, me, and my 6 sisters. And actually, I think, shortly after one of my nieces as well. So my eldest niece was born. And at that time, things weren't too stable in the family situation because the parents got divorced, and that in itself had certain dynamics and certain struggles up until a particular age. Then we moved back, and so I'm number 6 in the line of 7.
Okay.
So there were others that were then way older and started their careers, and I'm still in school, and everyone is sort of going through the motions. So maybe by the time I'm a teenager, then I have an older sister that's around your age now. Yeah. So she's going through a different dynamic. And then every now and then you have some of those sibling conversations. Yeah. So each one of them might have played a particular role at a different moment in time. Also, my mom has always been pretty much an inspiration for her kind heart. Like she's one of the kindest people I know. Even though her mouth could be fire when she's ready.
But you need that, yeah.
But she's a very loving and caring person. She's always been the type of mom that's the mom for the neighborhood.
Yeah.
So multiple people would claim her as mom as well. And then when I went through the whole music era, I started to look externally for the persons I look up to. And so then I started to look at all of the biggest names in the game. At some point, I was very much into Nas. So also with the Nas and Jay-Z beef, I was like FJZ too.
You pick a side. Yeah.
I picked a side hard because I was Nas, I was Mobb Deep, I was basically Queens.
Okay.
But then years later, when sort of the businessman in me started to emerge more, I started to respect Jay-Z's movements and stuff, and started to get a bigger love for Jay-Z. Yeah. Right? I mean, today with all the stuff that's going on, I'm not really sure. I'm not really trying to decipher what they did or how they did it or whatever. I'm just going back to the time, like, you know, early 2000s, late 90s, and what that time was like. And so looking to the biggest ones in the game was inspiration in the sense that, okay, they did it in their context where they're from, and whatever I'm going to do, I I have to do it in my way, in my context where I'm from.
Yeah.
And Eminem was also one of the people that I listened to very, very much. So I grew up in that era of hip hop where if what you were saying on the mic was not real and representing who you are and your truth, don't come around here.
Yeah.
So like everything in me was based on writing the truth. Even some of the songs that I would look back now and be like, maybe I shouldn't have.
Write that.
Right. Well, writing it is okay, but maybe recording it and putting it out is a different story. But
No,
that,
I hear these songs,
but that was my truth at the time. So that actually translated in my whole business trajectory as well. That everything I do had to be based in solid truth. And if you have to sort of lie, cheat, and deceive to make whatever moves, then it's not worth it, because that means that also a part of you is going to be dying with each one of those.
Yeah, but it's also inauthentic to who you are as a person. Yeah.
Exactly. And that was also it played a role in me putting music on pause, which eventually turned to music being stopped in my life. Because some of the experiences that I had being in New York, at some point I was in Virgin Records office talking to an A&R that was involved in signing Rihanna. So there were definitely some interesting moments, and in those moments you choose whether or not signing the piece of paper makes the most sense. I didn't get a record deal handed to me, but some other stuff.
Yeah.
But in the paperwork, there was also a lot of things that might be affecting me up till today.
If you had signed.
That would probably be taking money out of my pocket till today.
Ooh.
And if we zoom out and we look now at all the stories that come out, you see that there's a lot and plenty of artists that basically said that they got completely screwed with those first things that they signed.
So how were you aware at the time to not, like, what made you not?
Well, one of the key things was I was always taught you don't sign something you don't understand.
Okay, yeah.
So no matter if they show you golden towers and they say sign right here, it's yours, I like no.
Yeah, and listen,
I need to first understand what's in here. And everything was happening so fast at the moment, so I said, well, I need this digitally before I can sign. And they were kind of hesitant. Eventually I got it. I sent it back home. So two of my sisters contacted a lawyer and had them go through it. And then within a couple hours or a day later or something, I got the phone call. Well, in my family, they call me Junior. Junior, do not sign.
They didn't even say why, I just know.
So it's like, because I think at the time when they called me, I was in a studio where actually Cassidy was recording his album, My Drink and My Two Step. That album, that was being recorded in that studio at that time. Because as I was coming out of my session, he was going in to his. And a lot of people might think like, but you crazy, like you was right there and you didn't. But there were different things in me that kind of felt throughout the process, because my intuition is also very strong.
Yeah.
Throughout the process that were like, this doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm here. And then when I got that phone call and telling me, don't, I was like, okay, let me see how I can not sign and then still make certain steps here. And it just kind of, life happened, and yeah.
It's funny because you're speaking on a lot of people from the music industry that kind of you saw as a mentor. And like one of my favorite artists is J. Cole. And people asked me recently, I think within the past year, as to why. And I never really sat down to think about the why. But he recently released like a 10-part podcast series where he like dive into like him as a young adult going into New York, and that whole space between figuring out he was an artist and a rapper and getting the deal with Jay-Z and all he did. And I realized a lot of what you're saying now is also why I resonated with him, because he was always, if you listen to his music, it was always about like who am I and what do I want?
Yeah.
And not selling your soul for,
Yeah.
because he really dived into a lot of things he saw at the time. And he was just like, no, but I wasn't going to be me.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I guess it just resonated with me as a young adult, I guess, as to just being him authentically himself and him telling it in a story form with music.
Yeah.
I think that's always what stood out to me, I guess. But then I hear these stories and then you actually got to see that it was actually being presented to you. And it makes me think like, yeah, that's why it's very important to know who you are.
Who you are, yeah.
At that early in life.
Yeah. So that's why it's also so key to have the right amount of nurturing around you with the right messaging, to and also to give you enough space and room for you to discover.
Yeah.
Because you could also have people around you that are giving you the messaging and they want you to follow the messaging exactly in the way that they instructed you to follow the messaging, and that's not right. You should give that in. It's more like I can't remember where I saw this, but now that I have kids and also seen many kids sort of got raised over my lifespan, it's definitely true that in the early stage they're completely fragile and they need to be very well taken care of, right? They need to be protected. So I think that's like ages 0 to about 4 or 5. Then from like 4 to about what is it 10, 11, they say you need to instill structure and discipline and order and the core values, right? That's really instilled in those ages. And then from like 11 onwards to about 18, 19, that's when they're transitioning into teenagers. And the teenager doesn't need you to give them instructions, but they need coaching, right? So they're out there playing the game. You can't play the game for them. Because when they're out there with the other 15, 16-year-old that's telling them, hey, pop this pill, you're going to feel good. They needed to have the coaching from before to tell them, hey, leave that alone. You're right? And then they need to make the decisions in the game.
I guess that goes back to the saying of like, you could teach him, it's better to teach a man how to fish than to give him the actual fish. And
then there was this other saying where it's basically designed in our DNA that we, as teenagers, break away from the family structure. And that was, if we go back, because we live in this type of way in society for just 100, 200 years, right? And if we're going back centuries, then in many different parts of the world, it would be like these little smaller tribes, smaller communities. And in order for the communities not to continue to mix or blend or incest within the community, it's designed in the DNA that you want to break away from your parents and go out into the world. So now the man would go out and have to venture out into some other tribe to find his wife and then return after a certain amount of years. So even like as teenagers, you go through that moment where you don't want to listen to what your parents have to say, but maybe a trusted family member or friend of the family could say the exact same thing your parents are saying, and you listen to it, right? So that's why they say it takes a village, it takes a community. I even forgot what the original question was, how we got on this topic.
Having a mentor, basically. No, but I hear that. But then, it's not about you. But then I think about like, you know, having to raise kids in like the difference between the Caribbean and like Europe. Because I know like a couple of parents that I speak to, whether that's my friends or my age mates, who feel like the difference in raising their kids up here is not that they don't feel like they have a community, but they feel they have more of a community in the Caribbean. It's like even one of my colleagues moved back to Curacao because of that. And then it's one of my not worries, but it's one of those things I wonder how different would life be if I were to start a family here versus there. But you also a father here, so I don't know how that is for you.
So I have an interesting perspective because as a kid, I had both experiences.
Yeah, true.
And as a kid, I had certain struggles with having both experiences. But as an adult, I look back and think, wow, that was an immense amount of life lessons compacted into those early years. Because I always felt like a more grown adult, even at 18. Like at least the type of conversations I would have, the type of insights. At 18, I sometimes had deep conversations with 35-year-olds. And they'd be like, how the hell is he 18? But that's because of all of the life experience that was compacted into those early years. And at the end of the day, everything is a choice. Like there's a certain amount of community that you can build here as well, but it's not going to be the same as back home. Back home, it'll probably be a lot more family involved in the community aspect. But here it's the friends, chosen the acquaintances, the chosen family. Yeah. And in the chosen family dynamic, there's still a lot that you can do. Because if I look at my kids today, so when we were here between that was age 4 to 11 for me, I never went on vacation to the islands. Only when we moved back is when I experienced the islands. My kids have been, what is it, 7, 8 times? They're 7 years old. They've been 7, 8 times between, like, my wife is from Aruba. I'm from Sint Maarten, so they've been to Aruba and Sint Maarten multiple times. They hopped over to Anguilla. With what we have today with the internet, with FaceTime, they talk to my mom multiple times a week. So usually sometimes when I pick them up from school, I call her on FaceTime, hand them the phone, and they're having a whole conversation. So then the moments when she comes here, the relationship just continues. The moments when we goes there, it continues. So I do feel like there are ways to have that connection, but it's just a different form. And but you would need to have at least a very basic friend community around you up here to really have a bit of that feeling.
Or foster that. I think, if you don't have that, it makes it hard to then consider your surroundings or actual community. And I think sometimes up here, depending on where you live or your situation, people feel like we all in our own little bubble in Holland. Whereas the bubble bursts in the island because you don't have because I remember growing up, I would wake up and like uncles and aunts are already in the house. Here it's like, you need to tell me when you come in, you know? So it's just it's a different situation, I guess. But I guess the chosen family would always be also a community. It depends how you look at it, what you value as a person. But I value both. I feel like the friends I have is also a big blessing. That a lot of friends I have now I know since I was 0 or even from high school, to that point I know they would always be my community, you know? So I think even if I stay here at home, I'm going to have a village. It depends if they stay. That's the biggest question.
So if we tap back now to the high school time, or maybe towards the end of high school, 18-year-old Hadie.
Who was she?
No. What advice would you give 18-year-old Hadie based on the Hadie of today?
Back to the intuition of actually listen to it. Funny enough, we got an episode yesterday about intuition, and I don't think we teach children enough about what it is. And the difference between like the thoughts in your brain versus the feeling in your gut. And I'm an overthinker. So I think a lot of times I felt things, but because my mind it would question a lot of things, or I really sit down. I don't know if you noticed, but I think a lot. I don't know sometimes if it comes out what I'm thinking. But I observe and I think a lot, and I really go through all aspects or pockets of a possible situation, a question in my head, to the point where then at that point intuition ain't even part of the conversation, because I just more so looking at all the different ways or possibilities of outcomes. And I think at 18, back again too, I knew I wanted to achieve and do so much things. But I think at that time I was so young. I was focused on different things that I just didn't tap into that gut feeling of knowing what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was very impressionable in the sense of easily influenced. I'm not going to lie. So it's back to listening to my gut and sticking to doing what you want to do and not listening to those outside voices so much, because I did that a lot at 18. But at 18, I also failed Hague 5. Funny enough, when I was 17, once again, a gut feeling. I told my mom I wasn't ready to come Holland. But back to that, you just got to do it. But she was like, no, you can still go, but I ended up failing. I don't know if it was on purpose. I think back and I'm like, I just think I wasn't ready.
Yeah.
I didn't have the discipline. I didn't have the, I guess discipline. And I knew the step of coming here was going to require
a lot. And actually tapping into that, like, in general, I don't think most people, most kids aren't ready at such a young age.
Yeah.
And definitely if your intuition is telling you you're not ready, parents, listen to that. Like it's okay if they go a year or two later, and they feel that they're ready, because they'll also be more ready to take on the challenges and perhaps not have to get knocked down a couple times really hard before they get back up, etc. I mean, that in itself also has its own lessons, etc. But
I've noticed the difference of because I could have come when I was 17, but then I failed and I came at 18, and I probably wasn't ready, but I knew at this point I didn't have a choice. So I was more prepared mentally to do it. But I remember I came up at the time with a friend who had already graduated 2 years before and stayed and worked on the island. And how she approached life up here was already so different to me, because she already had spent 2 years outside of high school working on the island. Building,
so there was more independence, more structure.
Exactly. And I think sometimes we on the island, we think as soon as you finish high school, you got to move away, get an education, But I think ultimately it's about giving your child the tools to be able to like become an adult.
Coach.
And back to the coaching.
They as good as they is, they can't go out to win the championship without the team yet. No. They still got to learn all the fundamentals.
Exactly. But like, I think I know we sometimes think there's a specific way to do it, but it goes back
everyone is different.
And like listening to your child more, and I guess giving them the actual choice of listening to themselves, because I realize also even with my students, they're so aware. They're so aware. Even sometimes like how they perceive me, I'm like, wow, like they see me 4 hours a week, but they already have an idea of who I am as a person. Like one of my students was like, "Juffrouw, like you bent so droog." I was like, like, you so dry as a person. I was like, that's funny, because that's what my friends say a lot. A lot of the time. But it was just like, but it's not in a bad way. They were just like how she perceived it is that like a lot of things don't bother you, and they love it, because they have other teachers who's like they screaming and they getting on, and it's like sometimes they feel like I actually just listening to them, and it's not that I upset or anything, and it might come across as like nonchalant in a way. And I'm like, wow, the fact that you seeing this at 12, 13, and you can already put it into words. So then imagine a 17, 18-year-old who already had those thoughts from that age. It's like, I think we should trust them more at that age.
So if they're saying they need a bit more time to figure it out,
give them the time.
Coach them in that time.
Coaching, versus being a dictator, I guess.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
So, I think we can wrap up.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Ooh, that was a really good conversation.
Thank you very, very much for coming through.
Thank you for having me.
All the way to Eindje. I didn't say it, but I probably said it. But I also want to thank you guys again for having me on your show. That was a pretty amazing experience. Like being in the room with all the community up here and that whole vibe. So I definitely had lots of fun and positive energy being there with you guys and experiencing that. And definitely meeting you guys in these recent times, and now us being able to have this conversation and go more in depth. I also love and appreciate that a lot.
Thank you for having me. I think you should still come on an actual episode where we could sit down for almost 2 hours and our viewers get to see you differently than the live show.
Yeah.
Because I feel like having the conversations we've been having, I feel like you have a lot of insight from our perspective that a lot of people need to see in our community.
Yeah.
But you call this Eindje?
Yeah.
Eindhoven is Eindje?
Eindhoven is Eindje. It was dubbed by the rappers of like 2007 era, the Kempies and Fresco and all of them.
Okay, didn't know that. That's like Groningen have Grun.
I did not know that.
Yeah. Grun, but Grunn, but that's funny. But I was gonna ask you because it's like, for me, funny enough, like when we have a podcast and a guest, like we just talk general conversations. I think now we started our Patreon where we go in depth as to who we are. So I was wondering like how you perceive it, like now that we did an entire video, like we could talk about this outside the podcast too. But just like, what was your idea? Was it what you thought of who I was as a person? I always ask those questions. How do people perceive me? Like, how would you summarize it? Or what have you taken away?
What have I taken away? Well, the interesting, the things for me that were like brand new nuggets is your dad being from Belize and then having that Belize family and then connected to the States and having all of that exposure. I know you mentioned about your family before on the podcast, I knew who the family was, but then based on the description, when I found out who the family was, I was like, that makes perfect sense. And also, I can't remember where it was in the story now, but when we sort of tapped into coming out of that dark place, and what it took to come out of that dark place, and sort of the transition, and also like taking a bit longer over school, because I also took 7 years, started in wanting, and at the time when I left, I knew that I wasn't. It's not that I was ready to leave the island. Yeah. But I didn't know what I wanted to study. I just wanted to make music. I actually didn't even want to study. Yeah, you just wanted to do something. But based on my family background, that was also a no-go option. No, exactly. You see? Yeah. So actually it was my younger sister that found my first study, because she is way more structured and focused and goes by the rules. And I usually look at the rules and say, these rules serving me? No? Okay, forget these rules. And then you go your own way. Yeah. And I go my own way. So she came and she was investigating which study she was going to do a year before we were coming up. Wow. Yeah. And she paid her own ticket to come up here to do that. So that's the type of dedication at like 16. Yeah. Okay. And then she found this thing that was information technology and was like, hey, look, this is an option for you. I was like, okay, whatever. I still trying to see if I can get to the States. That didn't work out. So I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll go do that. Yeah. But you didn't have no kind of connection with technology or... Well, I had connection with technology. Yeah. Like you could see it even today. I love technology. Yeah. But also being a creative... Being a coder is very binary. It's the ones and zeros. Yeah. Everything is absolute. Like you either set it up in this way and then it works, or it doesn't.
Yeah.
Now my profession is a designer, which I switched to along the way,
Okay.
where I still have a connection to code and structure, but then I can creatively create this new canvas. And then once I figure out what this new creation is, I can give it to the coders to make it absolute work. So then kind of being the bridge there. But see, we get it completely sidetracked again.
You can run it off, but yeah. Yeah, no, I don't know if I finish. But the reason I asked is because I realized, like, if I really think on, like, who I am as a person is really to share my story in a way to make people know that they're not alone. And because whether I was in the wrong relationship, or it took a long while to finish study, or I really didn't know what I was doing, and it took me a while to, like, figure out what to do.
Yeah.
My biggest thing is I hope people take away that it's not like this beautiful process.
Yeah,
and journey,
it's messy.
It's so messy.
But it's still beautiful in all its mess.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, or it's not easy, I guess is the word.
Yeah.
So yeah, I hope.
But my biggest takeaway would be that all of that, because I've seen a couple episodes of you guys, and from everything I've seen, I do see that person.
Okay.
So that is the same person that's sitting here right now. It's just that I've gotten more details to understand. Let's say if you have the kleurplaat, the color in the, like you get to fill in more of the vakjes.
Yeah. More of the, and I supposed to be the English teacher. But you see, when you grow up like multilingual, I stuck your vakjes. I get what you mean.
Yeah.
I get
So it makes the picture more whole, that you have an even better understanding of why you are who you are.
Yeah, I get that.
So that would be that I would say would be the biggest takeaway from today.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Any final words for the peoples at home?
I guess I don't know if it'll be in the description. You can follow me on,
for sure,
on Hadie Leonie, but also more so the podcast right now. We're pushing that this year. Bite the Bullet Pod on Instagram, but you can subscribe on YouTube on Bite the Bullet Podcast, and also at Patreon. Yeah,
and this year you guys doing stepping up a lot more stuff with the Patreon, with the merchandise, with
we have merch now with the hoodies, back to the small school comments, but also something else, mugs, but also the thing with the studio is really not just for us. It's also going to be a way of giving back to the community, especially just creatives, so that we can have a space in Den Haag, Rijswijk. That's not as expensive, because renting rooms or just studios is so expensive. To give people the chance to tap into the creativity, because I think if I had a space like that at that time, with people that I trusted or looked like me, it would have been easier to, I don't know, tap into it earlier. So I hope that helps for people looking and watching.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much.
And I'm looking forward to us continue having amazing conversations in the future.
We will. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, peoples at home. Thanks for tuning in. You can hopefully you liked already. You can definitely drop a comment, because that helps the algorithm to push this further out to many others. And if you haven't yet, then subscribe, share with a friend, and let us know what you think. Thank you very much. Signing out. Bless.
Bye.